heavy,
bored.
But the first thing I wanted to get to about The Crossing here is I want to talk about McCarthy's style, as I mentioned in the monologue, and particularly his dialogue style, which isn't necessarily original to him, where he does these kind of no quotation marks, no punctuation to indicate that it's dialogue, and he does the kind of modernist thing where he'll go into dialogue and then tell you what the dialogue was too, right? So going between a character actually speaking and then having the narration of what the character actually said. And that's used interchangeably. And again, it's kind of a literary device, right? We've seen this in novels before. I believe on the Virginia Woolf episode 9, listeners, you can go back and listen to that. Cormac McCarthy is in that vein. I'm sure he's read all those, and I'm sure he's a big fan. But let's talk about the dialogue here, and let me try to get an example. And in that very first scene, we get like Boyd and Billy and Boyd going out in their farm and running into an Indian who looks like kind of a loner, and he's asking them weird questions, right? So let's just read this little excerpt, and I can give you a little idea of the dialogue that's happening between this. So the Indian turned and looked at the tank. The only sound was the dripping of water from the horse's raised muzzle. He looked at the boy. "You little son of a bitch," he said. "I ain't done nothing. Who's that with you?" "My brother." "How old's he?" 16. The Indian stood up. He stood immediately and without effort and looked across the tank where Billy stood holding the horse, and then he looked at Boyd again. He wore an old tattered blanket coat and an old greasy Stetson with the crown belled out, and his boots were mended with wire. "What are you all doing out here?" "Getting wood." "You got anything to eat?" "No." "Where you live at?" The boy hesitated. "I asked you where you live at." He gestured downriver. "How far?" "I don't know." "You little son of a bitch." He put the rifle over his shoulder and walked out down the shore of the tank and stood looking across at the horse and at Billy. "Howdy," said Billy. The Indian spat. "Spooked everything in the country, ain't you?" he said. "We didn't know there was anybody here. You ain't got nothing to eat?" "No, sir." "Where you live at?" "About 2 miles down the river." "You got anything to eat at your house?" "Yes, sir." "I come down there. You going to bring me something out?" "You can come to the house. Mama will feed you." I don't want to come to the house. I want you to bring me something out." "All right." "You going to bring me something out?" "Yes." "All right, then." The boy stood holding the horse. The horse hadn't taken its eyes from the Indian. "Boyd," he said, "come on. You got dogs down there?" "Just one." "You going to put him up?" "All right, I'll put him up." So that's just like a little excerpt, and I'm just going to go over a little bit of the dialogue. So that dialogue, there are no actual quotation marks or anything. The dialogue is just working, and there's very little, you'll notice, "Where you live at," he said. The boy hesitated. You know, like there's no he said, she said, they said kind of thing. It's, or Billy said, I said, right? Like there's just the dialogue. It's just there. It's just presented to you. And I know for some inexperienced readers or readers that aren't familiar with McCarthy's style, it can be a little confusing at times, but you do get the hang of it as you just keep reading through there. But you'll see there's just like a few moments where it's intermixed with description, with dialogue, and the conversations are always very sparse. Very sparse. Noticed on some of that, right? "Where you live at?" "I asked you where you live at." And there's just like these little tiny things, right? So the Indian in the first section of this novel we're meant to see that it's hostile, right? He's kind of hostile to these two brothers that live down the road a few miles and are watering their horses at the same spot. But yeah, it's fascinating. I think that a lot of people have tried to copy this type of dialogue style from McCarthy, which of course proves what type of influence he's had over literature in general, but specifically American literature, and specifically the Western genre of American literature. And I don't mean those kind of like, 60s, 70s, 50s cowboy novels. I mean, McCarthy elevates it off the fucking page. And again, if you're a fan, I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want to emphasize.
inner resources, American resources.
Being bored,
some activities are intentional, right?
it shows such a lack of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal?
Pal, I do.